Okay, so good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world, and welcome to the final panel session of what seems to have been a very successful Upstream Digital Transformation Europe event throughout the week. I'm Stuart Broadley, CEO of the EIC, privileged to be the moderator of this final panel session. Very quickly, I'll do introductions and then I will go into a bit of admin for the panel at the start, and then we'll get started. But delighted today to have Stephen Ashley from OGTC. Stephen, just give a wave, just check everybody can see you. And is your audio working?
Hello, everyone.
Good, good. Stephanie Diaz from BloombergNEF. Same from you, please,
Hello,
Stephanie.
everyone. Pleasure to be here.
Excellent. And Benjamin Sokolowski from Wintershall DEA.
Hello.
Okay, we're all here. Excellent, technology is working, so that's great. Please, just a reminder for everybody, you may well have been on this platform all week, but if you're new to the platform, we do want your questions. So we are going to do our best to have very stimulating discussion, but it's always better if we get great questions coming in from those listening in. So the question options are on the platform you're on, so please do that. If you have any questions, contact the organizers so that you can do that. Okay, so I work for an organization called EIC. We are the UK's largest energy trade association, and we help companies to export, diversify, and grow. And it's a great privilege to be able to moderate this final panel on a very important topic, a more important topic probably than ever, which is partnerships. So partnerships, for those of you that like words, could be defined as working together and sharing profits. And in Upstream, perhaps more commonly, the word collaboration is used, which is softer, less results driven. But I like the emphasis on partnerships. So it's kind of real skin in the game sort of partnerships, I think. And that's perhaps the context of what we're going to be talking about today. Actually, the research that the EIC has done in the past on when companies collaborate is it isn't actually normally a strategy on its own anyway. It is a way of working together to achieve another strategy. So we're going to be asking today a number of questions around, is partnership and collaboration, a growing trend or not? Obviously, there is this huge industry lurch to decarbonisation rightly happening at the moment. And is that going to encourage companies to have more appetite to work together? And if so, in what ways? We're in the year of COP26. Is the supply chain now moving to becoming one integrated energy supply chain? Is the idea of an oil and gas supply chain now dead? Is collaboration the only way, or perhaps the best way, for international oil companies to access the renewable and energy transition opportunities that they now need in order to meet their own net zero targets? What about governments? Are they encouraging partnership, or through the stimulation of new markets, which they will do as they did with offshore wind, they will now do that with hydrogen and CCS? Will that in fact create more competition than collaboration? How vital is digital adoption to successful decarbonisation and competitiveness and just running businesses more cost effectively and more safely? Does that encourage more partnership? How are companies interacting? How do they need to change the way they interact? Are contract models with supply chain companies going to change? If you're a service provider and you provide day rates, and then you provide a digital service, your day rates will probably be slashed. That's in conflict. How's that going to work? And then, of course, the dreaded topic of sharing of data, knowledge, and best practices. I mean, there is so much in this area of partnerships. I'm going to stop there and now go to the first of our panelists. They will each do kind of 5 minutes, introduce themselves, and then we'll go into the Q&A session straight after that. I remind you again, please do start sending in your questions, and at any time we will hear your questions and I will make sure we ask them. So with that, go to Stephen Ashley from OGTC. Stephen.
Yes, thank you, Stuart. Good afternoon, everyone. So my name, as I said, is, as Stuart introduced, I'm Stephen Ashley. I am from the OGTC. I have the title of Head of Offshore Energy 4.0. And I've been in the industry for a very long time. Perhaps I shouldn't say it, but essentially I'm a geoscientist, geophysicist by initial background, where I spent first probably part of my career, and then moved into digital data and using digital technologies to drive value. And on the subject this afternoon on partnerships, so partnerships are absolutely fundamental to the industry and its future. And I'm going to talk about sort of 3 key areas where I think partnerships are helping to facilitate this new future. So one will be how OGTC works with industry. The other one is, how are we going to work as an industry to enable a net zero future? And then as Stuart just talked about, that key aspect around collaboration around data. So at OGTC, our purpose, if we define our purpose to be supporting the oil and gas industry to develop and deploy technology to accelerate the transition to affordable net zero North Sea. So fundamentally, that is an aspect of, is a key mission statement, if you like, and fundamentally to do that, we invest in partnerships with industry, local and national government, with academia, to address the challenges that we see that will have to be overcome to get to that net zero North Sea. We work across with a range of sectors from upstream oil and gas through renewables to manufacturing. And fundamentally, we work on supporting the development of new technology, and we do that by co-investing with industry to identify the new capability and technology, but to co-invest to develop that capability. So that's essentially we work in a partnership straight away. So collaboration, people, and technical innovation at the heart of what we do. And over the last 4 years, so it's our 4th birthday this year, in fact, this week. And we have worked quite well with industry. We've co-invested over 160 million on projects and technologies. And the other aspect, I think, of what we do, apart from looking at the new technology, is helping attract the next generation of engineers and scientists to the energy industry, and to support the reskilling of the current workforce to solve what is essentially becoming the biggest challenge of our time. So OGTC partnership, that's a nice segue into the energy transition. I've talked a little bit about it in terms of our mission statement. We want, that vision I talked about, we aim to help eliminate emissions from existing facilities, while also working to, unlock or unleash, that sounds very sort of markety, the full potential of an integrated energy system. So it's not just upstream oil and gas, it's the whole energy system, and that needs to be integrated to get to a net zero future. And that means working in partnership with renewables, especially. So, that partnerships are absolutely key to transforming the new North Sea for a new and digital future. And it's been a fascinating few months. Big companies have pivoted their strategies, especially the majors. Regulators have set out their visions. And the scene is set, but we need action, and we need rapid and focused investment at scale. We need to close some of the technology gaps that exist, such as, how do we develop a full offshore power grid? How do we scale up and produce the production and use of blue and green hydrogen? We need to digitize the offshore energy sector, solving big challenges around storage, infrastructure, transmission sectors, some systems, etc. And the key thing here is no single company can do this. Partnering within our sector and cross-sector will be absolutely required to deliver on these major technical challenges. So, OGTC working with the industry, working in partnership with regulators, government, and other sectors, other than upstream oil and gas, is absolutely key. And the last area I just wanted to touch on was collaboration around data. So in partnership with OGA, Oil and Gas UK, and One, so you see what I did there, partnership, we recently issued a digital and data maturity report, which highlighted, amongst other things, that data is an absolutely key foundation to realizing digital, progressing forward using digital technology, which is a key component to underlying everything that we want to do. Data is key foundations, but it recognized the business models for collaboration has not really yet emerged, and that's still an area to work on. And the complex nature of our industry and our supply chain means that collaborative digitalization is probably a critical next stage, but it's in its infancy, and we really need to work on it. Organizations are attempting to transform on their own will probably suffer slow progress and wasted effort, or at least from an industry perspective, it'll be wasted effort because it will be duplicating other things that are going on. So attitudes to collaboration, I think, are positive, but we're not yet seeing genuine collaboration. Data sharing has a part to play. Organizations focusing on data models and APIs rather than locking into data. I think we're going to hear from some of the other speakers around things like this, around OSDU, for instance. So these are key components to realizing, an ability to share data, and in turn realizing the biggest challenge of our time, which is to get to net zero and the energy transition. That's probably enough, Stuart. Thank you.
Thank you, Stephen. That's great. And wow, I've got about 50 questions from all of that. So that's really great start. And again, for those listening in, please do throw in your questions. Okay, we're going to go to Stephanie Diaz next. Stephanie, to you.
So hello, everyone. Pleasure to be here on this panel. My name is Stephanie Diaz. I am an analyst at Bloomberg New Energy Finance. What we do is we write primary market research on energy, commodities, advanced materials, and of course, we write about digital transformation across all of those industries as well. I'm excited to be here today and talk about partnerships and upstream in particular. We've seen the oil industry move towards digitalization to reduce costs, extend lifetimes of assets, and reduce uncertainty. The sector as a whole has loads of data, particularly in exploration, where they have terabytes, petabytes of data just from seismic surveys by themselves. The challenges still remain in actually using all of that data, whether it be data management, integration of that data across upstream workflows, or creating advanced analytics. As companies have tried to grapple with this, they've moved more towards partnerships and collaborations in order to create solutions to these problems, in recognition that no one wants to solve the same problem 5-6 times. So I'm excited to talk about some of the trends that we've seen in this space, whether that be choosing your type of partner, the amount of ambition that some of these partnerships have, or the move towards more open source and collaborative industry-wide initiatives like OSDU. I think there's a lot of potential in just choosing the right kind of partner, whether that be a startup so that you can aim for some more technically ambitious projects, cloud provider, or one of the big technology firms so that you can focus on scalability, or if you want to partner with an OFS because they have so much industry domain experience and already know how to commercialize some of those projects, if that's the route you want to take. So yeah, excited to be here and looking forward to the rest of this panel.
Thank you, Stephanie. That's great. Looking forward to throwing some tough questions at you. But before we do that, we go to our final panelist, Benjamin Sokolowski. So Benjamin, to you.
Thanks, Stuart. Yeah, my name is Benjamin Sokolowski, working for Wintershall since 2005, actually. Mainly there in the maintenance area. Have been the CMS engineer for a long time, and also doing many things around data. And this is how I also engaged into the digitalization topic, because we started, I think it's almost 2 years ago, our first digital twin within the company for our German own operated offshore facility, actually. And when I think about partnership, it's often centered around the people that are working on projects, actually. So, and if we bring this people from partners with your own people together, and you have the right partner in place with the right mindset, with the right skill set, and so on, you can really help your own people to understand the problems we have from a different perspective. And also you can help them to kick this change off way quicker than if you would do it with a bad partner or on your own. And yeah, it's like if you look to software development, and you would hear advice from a senior developer. He would say, if you go into a team, look for people that are minimum having the same level of skills you have. And better would be more skills so that you can learn and really get bigger on that. The second thing I want to highlight now is how to get new partners actually. So we are in digital working mostly on so-called use cases. So and if one use case comes up, it might be clever to not just try it with one partner, instead of having maybe a competition with 2 or more partners, so that you really came out with a project and a partnership in the end that really solves the problem, with also the commercial aspect and technology aspect within. Yeah. That's from my side so far.
Okay, Benjamin, brilliant. Thank you very much. So I think we've got 3 really good panelists, and what I like is very different perspectives on this kind of common topic, which is skin in the game partnerships. And I think we're going to try and keep a focus on that. So Stephen, I'm going to come back to you. And actually, hey, you've got a couple of questions that have come in as well on the platform. So let's get the basic question out of the way first. If people want to know more about OGTC and whether or not there's funding available for the work they're doing in technology development, what's the criteria? How does it work? How do you choose, and how should they approach you?
So, how does it work? Essentially, we're open for anyone who's got an idea with particular technology that can support. They typically need to have at least initial discussions with industry partners, because anything we do from funding has to be matched by industry, and that's the partnership with industry that I was talking about. In terms of the specific technology and technology gaps that we are looking to fulfill, we define that through a sort of technology roadmaps. So those are available at a high level currently within the website, the OGTC website. And we're actually right now, this month, engaging in collaboration, engaging with the industry, with experts around some of the technical aspects of what we want to do, looking at where the technology gaps are that need to be solved immediately or into the future. So, and that's the key criteria about which we evaluate any idea over another. Obviously, we can't fund everything. We have to make choices. Sometimes those are very difficult, but the technology gaps and roadmaps that we have validated with the industry is the first place we go in terms of making sure. So if it's within our technology roadmap, then it goes into the process where we evaluate it. And then there are other criteria essentially around, the partnership that you've got with industry, what is the pull from industry, et cetera, that is evaluated as part of the process. That's probably enough, but we're open for any ideas, of course.
I think that's the point, isn't it? That you are open for any ideas, and ideas from all around the world, right? Not just limited to British companies as well.
No, so it's got to be able to, so that's a good point. So we're looking for technology. So we are a technology center. We're looking for technology that can be applied, but it's applied to the UKCS challenge, I guess. So the technology has to help solve the UK, and we are looking to support the supply chain. So if it is, technology coming from overseas, what we're looking for there is, creation of value, so GVA value to the economy. So that means jobs and so. But most people coming into the sector from overseas will be opening up UK offices. That helps that from that perspective.
Great. So Stephanie, I'm going to come to you then with I think a question just about, let's go straight to the topic of international oil companies and their needs to partner at the moment in the area of innovation upstream. Can you elaborate a bit more on where are we in this journey of upstream companies and their appetite and their needs to increasingly partner to solve the problems that they now face?
Yeah, I think we're still in the early stages of seeing how these partnerships are going to develop. some of them are industry-wide, like OSDU, in which case, it's been around for a few years, but we're only now, hopefully later in March, going to see the latest release, which is aiming to be more of the moving towards that data platform that has been promised for a few years now. I think the hardest part is figuring out how to incentivize movement in those partnerships. With OSDU, it's a lot about data management, about APIs, areas where oil companies need to be good in order to manage their data, be able to use it, but they aren't competing in it because they're not making money off of it directly, right? It helps other workflows. It's not something that is directly revenue generating. And as a result, it can be really hard to get people to make progress on that, right? We can see, plenty of partnerships to do data analytics that will sit on top of OSDU. For example, Shell, Baker Hughes, C3 AI, Microsoft recently announced the Open AI Energy Initiative, which is going to be, or is, AI-based applications currently focused on predictive maintenance, but they're planning to expand the scope of that as well. All of that would sit on top of any OSDU platform. And it's much easier to see how, the Open AI Energy Initiative is going to lead to commercialization, to revenue generation. It's a lot harder to see how something like OSDU does that. So I think we're still in the early stages of figuring out how the oil industry incentivizes itself to partner on some of the less exciting but very necessary stuff. Data management is one of those like eat your vegetables type of initiatives, like you have to do it. And some of that might mean leaning more on startups or on technology firms who have more experience in this. So we've seen, for example, a couple of companies partner with, for example, like Blueware, which is a startup specifically made a new sort of file system for seismic data so that it can be processed faster in the cloud. That's something that an oil company couldn't do itself. They don't have the, technological background to be able to do that, but that's something that a startup could do. And, oil companies can bring their technical expertise when it comes to subsurface data to make sure that it is useful. But it's really, partnerships are all about, finding your strengths, like identifying your strengths and recognizing like, where does it make sense to partner with someone else for the strengths that they bring.
So it doesn't sound yet though like a win-win. It still sounds like IOCs are in control. And it has to be they kind of, it's peripheral a little bit because it's no revenue generation from it. So I mean, I'll pass this on then, Benjamin, to you, which is, so for you as an operator, are you actually seeing enough incentive for you to go out of your way to partner in this space, or is it something which is pretty low level in the big picture?
I think the future will be on such platforms like OSDU, because it's not just having this open data platform where you can easily give access to partners. It's also that you put parts of your data centralized to another location. So this is the core essence actually, because this data warehouses, I think every EMP company has it on its own, right? So no need to rebuild this, but having this externally with this full set of APIs, with this community around it who actually can provide solutions, even if it's maybe not a big partner, it's more open source, which is OSDU itself. So this would be, will be a big impact in the future. But for now, since I think this is the first productive version from OSDU they are releasing right now, it's too early to really elaborate on the impact of this platform. But
and Benjamin, just I'm not sure that everybody listening in knows what OSDU is. Just in case, can you explain that?
It's the offshore
open subsurface data
universe. Yeah, exactly. So it's particularly a data storage lake, hub, whatever you want to call it, where every subsurface data you produce, from seismic to production data, drilling data, and so on, you can put everything in there. So, and then with machine learning, visualization tools, and so on, you can make benefit out of your data you're storing there.
Okay. So I'm going to ask the difficult question here, because I think we've all been in the digital space in oil and gas now for 3 years. We've all been to lots of conferences, and we've all talked about how it's actually, you know, from a supply chain point of view, it's hard to sell digital, hard to scale digital, even if you have sold it, and it's low margin. So in this move now, which you're all talking about, which is a move to open AI and shared data, is that really going to lead to more scale and more money? Or is it going to be kind of IOCs between them sharing data for their own use, but it's not going to cascade down to the supply chain? So I actually think we need to work on that. So I'm going to start, Stephen, with you, but if we can kind of, all three of us, develop that and really understand honestly, you know, we all have a dream of what would be a nice to do, but we're not dealing with nice to do it, we're dealing with what will really happen. So Stephen, with that context, really, are we actually going to change what we haven't fixed for 3 years and now get proper money and proper scale and proper behavior change?
Well, it's one of the perennial challenges, right? So driving technology, the industry has been working on standards for decades. I sort of hinted at how long I've been in the industry, and it's a very long time, and we've been working on data standards for years. But I think the key thing now is the recognition of the power of data. And data management, as Stephanie talked about, was always seen a bit of a poor relationship. It was the dead end role within even within an upstream operator. But everything's changed now, and the power of data management, the power of data, and understanding what you can do with data. And then once you understand that, you start running into problems like making data available, how to share data with partners, how to, if you're willing to drive partnerships with your supply chain, how do you share that and partner around the data? So there's some technical challenges, behavior challenges. But what I'm beginning to see is people understanding that there isn't a need, and that the digital maturity survey that I alluded to in my introduction, you know, it was clear from that that operators have a role in leading the direction of digital. So they have a key role in drive the change in the right way. So if they want to receive it, they've got to be upfront and leading, and just not expecting the supply chain to come to them, because they are largely, as you alluded to, responding to how the operators want things. So,
well, and they've been, after 3 years, been knocked back so many times, or having a small pilot but not able to scale it, that they're starting to give up.
So the challenge is, one of the biggest industry challenges is scaling, and what we see at OGTC, you know, we have a lot of projects that have developed proof of concepts that are encouraging or completely outright successful, but then scaling that at large is always a bit of a challenge, you know. So and some of that is helping the industry share best practice, understand what works, but there's definitely the commercial element to that needs to be addressed. I think from a data perspective, open data platforms, what they do, and some things like OSDU, it enables that platform that allows the collaboration to happen. So assuming you get past the legal and behavioral challenges, technically it's much more easier to do. And the opportunity then is to build a whole ecosystem around certain data sets, right? So that multiple supply chain companies can look at solving the same problem with the same standard sets of data. And we're beginning to see that with AI. So we talked a little bit about OpenAI, Stephanie mentioned that. You know, that has to happen on open data platforms. And a lot of work we do at OGTC is how do you create not only the technical, but also the legal governance controls around data that gets over this, I guess, sort of philosophical, psychology, challenge to let go of your own data. And because the immediate response is, I'm going to hold on to it. And how do you do that and enable these platforms? We begin to get
Stephanie, there. Yeah, exactly. Because I think, so I'm going to ask Stephanie the same question with a different spin, right? So Stephanie, OSDU sounds exciting. It's basically potentially an IOC club where they can, share data, seismic data and so on, but in the end, it doesn't go anywhere. So what's the incentive to use that OSDU to actually do something? And what do you think that something will be? What's the outcome that we should be expecting IOCs to deliver to industry because they have leadership? It's their leadership responsibility to do it. It's almost a condition of their license, perhaps, although I don't think it is yet, but perhaps it could be. So then what do we expect them to do with this? Or are we actually, is it collaboration rather than partnership? You know, are we back to it's no skin in the game? We don't really know what to expect.
Yeah, so a couple of points that I want to make on this. I think one of the things that's going to drive adoption of these big digital platforms, or at least attempts to adopt it, is the increased pressure that the industry as a whole is seeing because of the move to net zero. So, you know, we've seen Repsol, Shell both announce that they're going to move away from frontier exploration in the next couple of years, which means they're going to be relying on data from existing oil fields to determine, you know, what more can they get from those oil fields, from nearby oil fields, right? They're going to want to, you know, do additional seismic, but on a more limited scale to, you know, add to the data that they already have. So if you're trying to get more out of your existing assets, you're really going to want to be able to use all of the data that you have, which is what I think is going to be one of the pressures that drives them to actually, you know, move towards a more unified platform to use this not just, you know, in exploration, but across the entire upstream value chain. Additionally, I think companies do have an appetite, the IOCs have an appetite for putting some of the applications that they've already built in-house on platforms like OSDU, because they see that as a revenue generating opportunity. So, you know, there's the Open AI initiative that I mentioned that Shell's a part of. They've already contributed, I think, like 5 of their control valve and other predictive maintenance applications to it. So, you know, if you're an IOC, you've already developed some great analytics for production, for example, you can sell that to your peers. And that's another opportunity for you. And I think the last thing that's going to drive IOCs towards more adoption is they do not want to be locked into any particular single vendor when it comes to these analytics, right? So they don't want to, you know, they're all for partnerships, but they don't want to be stuck with a partner for forever. And so they want to have these open source. That way, if they find, you know, this partnership has gone great, but we think we need something else from a different partner at this point, they want to be able to do that switch and avoid any sort of vendor lock-in. And so I think all 3 of those are going to drive them to, or they're at least all drivers towards adopting these more centralized open source platforms.
Okay, Steph, that's helpful, definitely, because we're sort of moving towards, there should be benefits, that will drive behavior change. So Benjamin, here comes the tough question. I'm so sorry, my friend. Tough question is coming to you. What is the measurable benefit? What is it going to be? What is the benefit and how will you measure it?
Oh, since I'm not really deep into all this exploration stuff, I cannot go into detail. But since we decided to move our exploration advisory tool first onto your OSDU, I think this will be one of the first outcomes then, that you will really can quick have insights on the assets you want to explore, and you can see what was already done, and you can have the seismic interpretation there and so on. So you don't have to collect all the data. So I think it sounds really easy actually, but it isn't. So for example, for our Ogario field in Mexico, we had, first of all, a huge amount of data we get when we got the license. And second of all, we had the language issue. So headquarters is mostly speaking English and German. And 99% of these documents were in Spanish. So, and this is something you can adapt to OSDU as well. So natural language processing, so that you don't have to take Spanish classes to really get into the insights of this whole set of documents and interpretation, so on. So I think this would be one first key benefit out of it.
So this is the kind of standardization again.
Yes.
Got it. Okay. So I'll move on, but I think it's very interesting, isn't it, to try and process when are we going to see what's it going to feel like when it's different. So Stephen, back to you then with a slightly different question. You might be relieved to know. From your point of view, are you seeing a much more increased take-up of different companies across the value chain partnering and working together for the good of net zero now? Is this a clear move specifically around the move to net zero, or is it still very early days in terms of that behavior change?
No, I mean, I think people recognize that, you know, that no one company, so companies will have their own strategy for becoming net zero, depending on what state, you know, where they are, what sector they're in, and some will have more challenges than others. But what we see is that companies are understanding that Scope 1, Scope 2, and Scope 3 emissions are different in nature, and you can certainly maybe go after your Scope 1. So the Scope 1 emissions are emissions essentially directly related to your own operations. So that, you know, you can address those generally on your own in a more traditional way, obviously with partnering with technical companies. Once you get into Scope 1, it's more of your downstream, how your product is being used. There's no way you're going to address that on your own. The other aspect to net zero, as I mentioned earlier, is it's an energy integration. So from a UK perspective anyway, it's a massive integration between offshore renewable energy, majority of which will be offshore wind, which the industry, the oil and gas upstream industry, has got some massive engineering capability and expertise that can be applied, not only in the engineering around floating wind, because that's going to be the big drive, you know, necessity. But also the asset management of those things. So there's a great there needs to be a great collaboration, and we're beginning to see it. So I think at major levels, you know, you just see BP essentially as an example making partnerships just the same way as we have joint ventures in upstream oil and gas around offshore wind. So they've done it in the US, and now they're looking at the UK sector or the European sector. And I think for us, you know, as an example, we have an alliance, an energy transition alliance, it's called, with the ORE catapult. So that's the offshore renewable energy catapult, where we are jointly developing projects that are going to solve this. And again, they're not done just between us, they're done with industry. So I think we're beginning to see people doing it. I mean, the key thing for us is also helping the supply chain. And one of the key projects there actually is helping the supply chain, so that the supply chain in each sector understands what the potential is and what the capabilities required, the technology gaps are, to help up and support the supply chain in that space. So, and I think that's key, making people aware, because we're going to, during the energy transition over the next few decades, we're going to have to get a supply chain that has been geared to support upstream oil and gas, being able to diversify, not just in energy, but that's a key area for it. And the potential
there. This idea of an integrated supply chain, exactly. No longer an oil and gas supply chain.
Absolutely.
Great, Stephanie. So my question to you then, linking or building on this is, so are you seeing in your research that there is a piling into the renewable market by international oil companies and others actually, but especially international oil companies? And at the moment, it is this early days, everybody's being nice to each other, and they are partnering with each other in order to enable new entrants. Already Ørsted are complaining, I think, about this crowding of the UK market, I hear. So at what point do you think this moves from collaboration and partnership to competition? Because ultimately it can't just be about sentiment and moral good behavior. It is ultimately about shareholder return and economics. So at what point do you think, what are you seeing in terms of a move to economics driving, hey, you know what, it was good you helped us for a year, thank you, now we don't need you, we now compete. And I can tell you, Ørsted already feel like that's happened to them, but it's not yet feeling like that between the oil companies who are collaborating, but at some point they can't keep doing that, right? What's your view?
Yeah, I think we're still in the early days of seeing IOCs invest in the renewable space and in net zero technologies. You know, in our research, you know, we've been tracking a couple of IOCs, and since 2015, they've invested like $52.6 billion in this, 70% of which is Total, Equinor, Shell, BP, and Repsol. So it's very concentrated in terms of who's actually making moves in this space.
And where they are.
And so, yeah, and where they are. They're all basically the European oil majors. So, it brings up a couple of questions as to, what's going to happen to the industry. Approximately half of the companies that we track have announced some sort of net zero target. That means half haven't announced anything at all and aren't really making this any part of their, at least public strategy for the next couple of decades. And we particularly see like the laggards in the Americas. So all of this to say that, I think overall for the industry, it's still very early. Too early to, say no to partnerships because everyone's still in the early stages of moving into that space. But, eventually, particularly, in the European markets, we'll probably start seeing more of the cutthroat competition that you were mentioning.
And when do you think that'll be?
Oh, I don't think I'd venture to make a guess as to when yet.
I think soon.
I
think soon. But yeah. It's very interesting how right now, with lack of knowledge, people partner. When they don't have the knowledge, they partner. Of course they do. They share. They spread the risk and spread the bets in order to get access, and it works. But at some point, then, and so this, Benjamin, I think segues nicely into you. So as an operator, are you all feeling now the pressure to move? As obviously you are doing work already in various forms in terms of looking at your operations and cleaning, sort of decarbonizing. Are you feeling pressure to partner around the decarbonization space yourself, and are you already doing that? Or are you looking to do more of this kind of stage one where you're looking at your own assets in your own way with supply chain partners rather than equity partners? What's your approach going to be?
I think by now we are more into reducing stage one, actually. So we have also some nice project around that. For example, and doing our ship fleet just running on hydrogen and cutting off the own energy production on our offshore facility. There's some project we kicked off last year or already had finished last year. I think there's much going on within our company now, especially on hydrogen. Not yet about much on the renewables, actually. So we are not investigating now this much, even if we had already thought 10 years ago about maybe just getting 2 or 3 windmills beside our production plants to get energy from this and not from the nuclear plant 30 kilometers away. So, but yeah, this will be thoughts in close future, especially when it comes also to our products we sell, because yeah, we get them sold quite good, I think. But if you cut down your CO2 emissions because you don't fire your gas there anymore, you're moving the problem around to your customer actually. So and there will be in future also collaboration or partnership, maybe depends on both sides actually. Yeah, to maybe be a helping hand to solve the problem there, because we are initiating it and they have actually the problem later on, because they have way more emissions than we have because we don't burn this gas anymore.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and so if I understand that right, the partnership is currently more with the supply chain than it is with other IOCs, right?
Yes.
Okay, brilliant. So we've actually had quite a few questions coming in, which I am now going to try and pick up on some of these, even though there are so many things, good things that we need to talk about, but let's just make sure we just pick up on this. So the question that's in from Ed Evans, OSDU, we're still talking about vendors, a vendor lock-in, not partners. How will we get over that? So I don't know who wants to pick up on that one. Anybody got a quick answer to that one?
Well, I can have a go. I mean, I think you will always have concerns from operators or from a commercial perspective that they are locked in from a technology. I mean, and that's just the reality. Stephanie talked about it. But what the platforms enable, and the platforms that we're talking about enable, is for the supply chain to demonstrate capability, and it allows an operator to basically get rid of that worry about being locked in, and therefore that is actually a good thing, because then, you know, the opportunity to work with not necessarily a big provider, but they can pick and choose, invest in class on for specific issues. They can pick up, even if they're developing in-house, they can pick up algorithms, or you know, so you can create a data mart or an algorithm mart on top of the data platform. So these open platforms are good because it's about making data and things available, which anyone then, in theory, depending on the various rules, but essentially if he's treated as being open, it's open to small companies, larger companies, you know, academia who may want to spin something out and develop new capability.
Yeah, but it's not regulated, is it? So in the end, it is about good behavior and leadership of oil companies to make it happen.
Yeah. You know, and
so it's still going to feel like a parent-child in reality.
I think if we do look at leaders, though, if we look at leaders in the space from an operator's perspective, they are creating partnerships, they are experimenting with new business models, which the supply chain need to be aware of, triumphing, and you know, and that might be we need to change, look at our procurement processes a bit as well, perhaps, and that's key. But the leaders are changing. So again, I come back to that leadership from operators. They do need to lead, not just on the technology, but in how we apply technology. So it shouldn't. It should be more partnership.
I've got lots of questions, Stephen. Very sorry to interrupt, but thank you for that. And there's a question to Benjamin. I'll ask you from Tommy Angel, which is really linked to that what Stephen was talking about there about new contract models, new ways of working. So he's asking about in partnerships who has responsibility to manage and monitor the digitalization process. Could be a first of a kind. So the risk models, and this little bit obviously the very basic model of if you are providing, you know, a service which currently gets paid by the number of people on a platform, and then you use digital to improve, you know, the efficiency of work. So then you halve the number of the people on the platform. It means as the service provider, you get half the revenue. So do you see that there are different contract models required to give aligned objectives between the operator and the supply chain? Because I'm still hearing very few cases where that is properly happening. What's your view on that?
I think yes, partly there should be new contract models. For our digital twin, for example, we had a contract, and in addition to that, we had a performance contract. So if they were the partner was able to deliver within the scope, which always got adopted during this process, they will get extra pay. So, and it's also what we are looking for example, if you go to some software provider, which has software as a service, you usually pay a license volume. So you purchase 200 licenses, and then you get this price per license. But sometimes waste of money if you purchase 200 licenses and just using 80. So, and this will be a change in the future, how we can get together with partners and new type of contracts.
Okay, so it's almost a two-step contract. It's the transaction contract, but then a sort of a return of value based upon hitting certain objectives.
Yeah, a performance-based contract, actually. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, if I could just add to that. And,
yeah, go ahead, Stephanie. Yeah.
Yeah, in our research, you know, we've seen OFS firms that really want to move towards more, you know, software as a service based pricing models, just because it's, you know, it's good recurring consistent revenue. But some want to do some more on top of that, where it's some amount of software as a service, but also, you know, layered on top is usage as a service. So trying to price based on how much, you know, data or how much cloud is computation power is actually used. And like Benjamin said, some more outcome as a service type contracting models. So we're seeing some interesting ones coming, some interesting new contract models being experimented with right now.
Stephanie, just continue with that question from Klaus Gierschik, which is also asking about where companies are doing data analytics knowledge for the products, do they tend to integrate the solution into the customer's software, or do they prefer rather a ready-for-use plugin? I don't know if you or anybody else has a view on what's typically the way that's working now.
Yeah, I think it depends a little bit on the particular IOC, actually. There are some that prefer, to partner with a startup and then create a sort of customized version that integrates well into their existing software, in which case it's mostly, most of the intellectual property is actually of the startup, but it's a custom version for the company. Others want something that is more plug and play because they don't want to, lock themselves into a particular type of software before testing it thoroughly. So I think it depends a lot on the particular oil company, actually.
Brilliant. So I think I've tried to make sure that by grouping a couple of questions, I think I've answered most of the questions that have come in. But if you still have any more, we still have 5 minutes left, so please do send them in. So I suppose let's now wrap up with each of you with a kind of, so looking to the future, right, which is decarbonization, it's digitalization, it's questions about the future of value. Where is the value coming from? So actually shareholder pressures to oil companies and to the oil supply chain. So fundamental questions, do we want to be in this or not if the money's not there? And of course, it's global uncertainty around travel and trade and COVID and everything. All this world we're going into, you'd be a brave person to predict even what's going to happen tomorrow, but I'm now going to ask you to predict 1 year from now. So 1 year from now, in this world of partnerships, with all of that that's going on, do you think that, or let's change it, where do you think would have made the most progress in partnership? Will it be digital, or will it be decarbonization? Will it be working with government? Will it be, or do you still think we'll be struggling to get traction and we'll be so distracted by other things? So Stephen, I'll start with you. So clarify the question. A year from now, just a year, it's not that long, but in the moment it feels like a long time, where will we have made the most progress, and perhaps why?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's sort of two parts to that. So a year is not very long, obviously, in terms of technology, and although in some cases you might think it's a short time in the way some of the technologies advance. But
the question is in the context of partnerships.
Sure. So what we see is, I think we'll see that there'll be pressure on the majors to demonstrate they're actually taking the action that they say they're going to, and we're beginning to see that with some of the action. I'm just using BP as an example, but Shell and the others. So investing in energy storage, but investing in offshore wind. So are they actually going to expand their portfolio? It'd be interesting to see how they slow down, but we will see real progress in that. There are partnerships. So what you'll see, for instance, coming from Aberdeen, there are partnerships between Microsoft, BP, and Aberdeen Council looking at this, creating an energy city, a smart city, an energy hub. Those sort of partnerships we're beginning to see more of, and I think we will see them coming to fruition, beginning to start. And the other area is the collaboration between the industry, the regulator. So especially, let's just focus a little bit around data, because I think we need to progress that. In some key areas where people are psychologically challenged, and when I say people, organizations are psychologically challenged to share the data, the regulator has a key role to support and insist or suggest quite strongly you should be sharing data in specific areas. So areas I think we'll progress in is around how do we get robotics and autonomous systems used at scale? How do we do P&A? So there's a big outstanding P&A backlog. How do we do that cheaply and quickly as possible? Sharing your data around some of those key areas will be enabled. So I think we'll begin to see that, and the technology that is going to support how those data are pooled. So this is the OSDUs, the open footprint, which we haven't mentioned, which is sort of son of OSDU, looking at carbon. How do we measure carbon emissions in a more standard way? So that's what I see. We progress in those sort of areas.
That's a pretty positive outlook, actually. I think if we do all that, that will be good.
Yeah.
Okay. Stephanie, really the same question for you, I guess. Try not to duplicate, of course, but ultimately, a year from now, in this context that we're talking here, still the context of upstream companies, and they're all transforming, but in the context of partnerships, with so much going on, a year from now, just a year, where will we have seen progress?
Yeah, I think I would just say in a year from now, we're going to see some of the European IOCs make more progress in terms of tying digital and decarbonization together. We've already seen some of this with BP and Shell announcing separate deals and partnerships with Microsoft, each focusing on tying those two together. Whether BP and Shell providing renewable energy for Microsoft providing their cloud computing and analytics to the oil majors. And I think we're going to see more of those types of partnerships that try to tie the two together. We'll have to see how successful that actually is, because while they, digital and decarbonization do have a lot in common, if your assets perform better and they use less energy, that's a win on both sides. You have lots of synergies. But we'll have to see, if one gets prioritized over the other and it's just a linking in name only, or whether it's actually a true, joint effort on those things.
This reminds me of, they used to say in the oil industry, the safest companies are the most profitable companies. I remember that was a big thing for a while. And a lot of people actually kind of worked. Maybe what you're touching on here is the most digital companies will be the most able to decarbonize, because they'll react fast, they'll have the right data, they will understand how to collaborate, and because they will have the lowest cost, they'll be the most competitive. So
yeah, and our researchers definitely
seeing
that.
Yeah,
and our
but we're not there yet, are we?
well.
I mean, so that again is a pretty optimistic 1 year from now. But I actually think that's possible as well. I think not everybody, but I think you might find a few in those countries where, Norway, we know they're ahead in technology, let's accept it, but also Australia, where digital for them, they fully embraced it because they were so busy with LNG that they could not get the people. They had to embrace that, digital. So 5 or 7 years ago. So very interesting, Daphne. Thank you. And so Benjamin, come to you. Fine. It's the same question. Try not to duplicate, but really just 1 year from now, where will be the progress in partnerships?
I think 1 year from now, we will be exactly there to kick off decarbonization from the digital area. So we are able to reshape contracts, and maybe also on a CO2 savings level, so that you're really contracting a partner with, if you save 90% of our CO2 emissions, then you get extra fee for whatever sum. Yeah, but I expect this will be some way towards the decarbonization, to getting really digital and also brought into the organization, since we already heard that many parts of our organizations, Shell, Aker BP, our organization is still analog, right? So we are still rolling with new ways of working, agility, and so on. So we have to prepare the organization to really kick off such topics, because they are bigger than just optimizing some ESPs.
I really like that way of closing out, actually, Benjamin, because basically I think what you're almost referring to, so we've got COP26 in Glasgow in November, where perhaps one of the major outcomes will be a global agreement on carbon pricing. So I don't say that with any knowledge of what's going to be agreed, but that could be one of the outcomes. And I know oil companies feel that is one of the things they would need as a kind of common rule set, standard carbon pricing. So good behavior means you are taxed less, bad behavior, you are taxed more. That would then cascade through to the supply chain, wouldn't it? Where then suppliers then, as part of their tender process, have to show that they have their own net zero carbon plan. And if they don't, they will find it more difficult to win work. It'll definitely cascade across work across borders. Countries will be more competitive, they're further ahead. So this, because of COP, actually in the next 12 months, you're right, that could be a direct outcome, which is then it's a clearer understanding of the cost of business if you do not aggressively decarbonize, and the profit of business if you do. And that's a very interesting way to close out. So we are out of time. Thank you everybody for listening in. To our panelists, that was a brilliant discussion, and I think it's a really inspiring way to end. 1 year is a long time, but actually it feels like there's a lot that will happen. I think a lot of what you talked about here will happen. So thank you so much everybody for listening, and I'm going to hand back now, other than just to say one more time, thank you to Stephanie, to Stephen, to Benjamin for really excellent panel discussion. So I will hand back to the organizer, Charlie, and wish everybody a great weekend. Thank you.
Same to you. Thanks.
Thank you.
Yeah, and just to reiterate, thanks to all the panel, Stephanie, Stephen, and Benjamin, and thank you to Stuart as well for moderating the session. That's it for the Upstream Digital Transformation Conference. Now, I hope people have enjoyed it, and we will be able to follow up with recordings from next week, hopefully. But that's it for now. So thank you again, and goodbye.
Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.